Draft Communications Act 2003, Disclosure of Information Order 2024.
I call the Minister to make the motion.
Thank you, Mr Twigg, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I start by welcoming the Minister, the Shadow Minister, to his place? And I look forward to many more encounters, and I think we have another one on tomorrow. Mr Twigg, I beg to move that the Draft Communication Act 2003, Regulations 2024, which was laid before the House on the 9th of September this year, be considered. The Online Safety Act lays the foundations of strong protection for children and adults online, and I thank colleagues for their continued interest in the Online Safety Act and its implementation. It is critical that the Online Safety Act is made fully operational as quickly as possible, and the government is committed to ensuring the Act's protections are delivered as soon as possible. The statutory instrument being debated today will further support the implementation of the Act by Ofcom. This statutory instrument concerns Ofcom's ability to share business information with ministers for the purpose of fulfilling functions under the Online Safety Act 2023, under Section 393 of the Communication Act 2003. This, Mr Twigg, corrects an oversight in the original Online Safety Act that was identified following its passage. The Section 393 of the Communications Act 2003 contains a general restriction on Ofcom disclosing information about particular businesses without consent from the affected business, but with exemptions, including where this facilitates Ofcom in carrying out its regulatory functions and where this facilitates other specified persons in carrying out specific functions. However, this section does not currently enable Ofcom to share information with ministers for the purpose of them fulfilling functions under the Online Safety Act. Similar powers for sharing information under the Communications Act 2003 can be found under the Enterprise Act 2002 and the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act 2013. This means that where Ofcom to disclose information about businesses to the Secretary of State, they may be in breach of the law. So therefore, it is important that a gateway exists for sharing information for these purposes, so that the Secretary of State can carry out key functions of the Online Safety Act, such as setting the fee threshold for the online safety regime in 2025, or carrying out a post-implementation review of the Act required under Section 178. This statutory instrument will therefore amend the Communications Act 2003 to allow Ofcom to share information with the Secretary of State and other ministers strictly for the purpose of fulfilling functions under the Online Safety Act 2023. There are strong legislative safeguards and limitations on the disclosure of this information. And Ofcom is experienced in handling confidential and sensitive information obtained from the services it regulates. Ofcom must comply with UK data protection law and will need to show that the processing of any personal data was necessary for the lawful purpose. As a public body, Ofcom are also required to act compatibly with the Article 8 right to privacy under the European Convention of Human Rights Act. In conclusion, Mr Twigg, we will continue to review the Online Safety Act so that Ofcom are able to support the delivery of functions under the Act where it is appropriate.
The question is that the committee has considered the Draft Communication Act 2003, Disclosure of Information Order 2024. I call the opposition spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Twigg, and it's a pleasure to serve in your chairmanship. And can I also welcome the Minister to her place? It's great to be able to serve opposite her as Shadow Minister of State. Of course, I'm sure colleagues across the House welcome the fact that we have the Online Safety Act on the statute books now and want to make sure that its provisions are fit for purpose and can be utilised as soon as possible. And so this tidying up DL clearly is necessary to resolve any this particular lacuna of law which has been discovered with regards to data disclosure. That in itself, I believe, is uncontroversial. Clearly, there are questions to be asked in terms of ensuring that any data sharing is proportionate, that it does not infringe on confidential data that businesses hold in fulfilling the data sharing duty to the Secretary of State. And so my question to the Minister is, what confidence does she have that businesses have adequate mechanism of redress to ensure that any data sharing that occurs under this provision is proportionate and meets the legal criteria as she has set out in her speech?
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Chair. There is far too much illegal, harmful activity online and especially on social media, and that impacts women and young children disproportionately. Not only have parents reached out to me, but even when I've spoken to young people themselves in schools and the Girl Guides, what they say to me is it's online harm and bullying that worries them the most. The government and social media companies must do more to keep people safe online, especially young people and children. We do as Liberal Democrats respect the right to privacy and freedom of expression for those who are legally and responsibly using these platforms, but bullying and abuse must be stamped out. So we therefore welcome this measure to update regulations so that Ofcom can fulfil its duties. We just want to ensure that these changes do support the obligation to fulfil those duties while protecting the right to privacy. Also to push the codes of practice can use to innovate or push companies to further innovate to ensure that we can protect people online, but also to ensure as part of the bigger picture is a question of education for those who can be upskilled whether to understand how to use online or protect themselves from harms. So thank you very much for this measure and we will support it.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Swig. I thank both the Shadow Minister and the spokesperson for their comments. This government is committed to the effective implementation of the Online Safety Act, and it is crucial that we remove any barriers to this, as we are doing with this statutory instrument. This statutory instrument will ensure that Ofcom can cooperate and share online safety information with the Secretary of State where it is appropriate to do so, as intended during the Act's development. In response to the questions raised by the Shadow Minister regards to the proportionality, there are safeguards that exist around the sharing of business information. Section 393 of the 2003 Act prohibits the disclosure of information about a particular business which has been obtained using powers under certain acts listed in the subsections, except with consent or where an exception applies. Ofcom is therefore restricted in disclosing information obtained using its powers to require information and other powers under the Online Safety Act, aside from when an exception applies. Ofcom is an experienced regulator and understands the importance of maintaining confidentiality, and it is also a criminal offence for a person to disclose information in contravention of Section 393 of the Communications Act 2003, including with the Secretary of State. In terms of the Act's implementation, as questioned by the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, on 17th of October, Ofcom published an updated roadmap setting out its implementation plans. Firms will need to start risk assessing for illegal content by the end of the year. Once Ofcom finalises its guidance, the illegal content duties will be fully in effect by spring 2025, and Ofcom can start enforcing against the regime. Firms will have to start risk assessing for harms to children in spring 2025, and the child safety regime will be fully in effect by summer 2025. In conclusion, Mr. Twig, I hope that the committee agrees with me on the importance of implementing the Online Safety Act and ensuring that it can become fully operational as quickly as possible. And with that, I commend these regulations to the House.
The question is that the committee has considered the Draft Communications Act 2003 Disclosure of Information Order 2024. Many of that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order.